to adjourn this meeting. This is a special call for special action that we need to take before the end of the year that we're supposed to do every year. And I've noticed on the agenda that it's given to the city manager, so I'll hand it over to you to begin. Item number 1, which is budget amendment for 2022.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. And the budget amendment, budget reconciliation is something the city has done for years and years. At the end of the year, and this is to reconcile the final budget before you take action to accept or adopt the fiscal year 2022 audit to be presented to you next. 2 items. One is to amend the general fund administration budget to reduce it by $235,000 and increase public safety department budget by $235,000. This is a result of purchasing rolling stock for the public safety department, but we could not recognize the revenue of selling vehicles that we get Phillips and Tahoes. That has to go back into the admin budget. It does not go back into public safety. Money is almost a wash, but we had to reflect it as a budget amendment. Secondly, you took action in 2022 to authorize the transfer of ARPA funds from capital into the general fund under the final treasury rule, standard allowance, which is a revenue loss. You took that action. This is just ratifying that action for the purposes of the end of the year reconciliation. So with those, that we are recommending approval of the proposed reconciling budget amendment for 2022 as I presented.
Thank you, Mr. Radford. And again, this is for the 2022 budget. We are in the 2023 budget year currently, and the 2024 budget starts on January the 1st. So this is directly related to the audit report that we're about to adopt and send to the state. But are there any questions or comments related to Mr. Radford's presentation of the budget amendment? All right, if there are no questions, is there a motion?
Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve proposed reconciling budget amendment for 2022 as presented by the city manager.
Thank you. I have a motion from Mr. Hicks. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Cohen. Any further discussion before I call the vote? All right, all those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Very good. Next, we'll move on to the most riveting part of the meeting, the audit report. Mr. Radford.
Thank you, Mayor. And before I get into the details and ask for our auditor to come up and present the 2022 audit, I wanted to just give thanks again to Cindy Pugh and her staff, all of our department heads and managers for their hard work on making sure that all the documentation was in place for them to do an accurate and fair review of our finances. I'm pleased that you will hear that we're presenting an unqualified audit, which seems like a weird term. But the governmental accounting is the highest accolade you can get. The auditor will make his report without qualification and without any encumbrances. That's a very, very important, I think, to the fiscal integrity of the city. Fiscal year 2022 ended December 31st, 2022. So you asked, why are we waiting so late to accept the audit? The audit was due in June 30th, but because of a number of situations, number one, our auditing firm handles a lot of local government clients, and so they were substantially overburdened as well. And governmental accounting is a very, very specialized field, and we're pleased that we have some of the best around that serve our city. Secondly, our auditor was going through peer review, which is, I think, being audited by another auditor. And you'll get a letter next year from our auditor that describes the outcome of that peer review. I think that's very good news for our city, the fact that the auditing field requires auditors to be audited by their peers. Thirdly, there was a new rule issued by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board that dealt with how cities and counties and governmental entities need to handle leases, and leases in a very broad broadest of terms, includes licensing, copier leases, licensing for software, real estate leases, all those types of things. And that has caught every local government, and auditors, I guess, in situations, all trying to learn at the same time how to do that. I'm pleased we worked through that. We're looking at software packages that we can use going forward to help us track all those things, so that it makes the job easier moving forward. The last thing is ARPA. With the decision, the acceptance of ARPA funds, which are federal funds, over a certain amount of money that threw us into a different category that we required a very extensive single audit required by the federal government, and our auditor will report on that as well. So with that, I will ask Wayne Tuck to come up and present the fiscal year 2022 audit. When we did apply for the extension, they don't give you a 30-day extension, they don't give you a 45-day extension, they give you extensions in 6-month terms. So that's why our extension was from June 30th to December 31st. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here and holding this special meeting so that we can have this. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak to you again once a year, again this year regarding the audit. I'm not going to take up too much of your time today. I'm sure everybody has a lot of things they'd like to be doing this time of year. So I'm just going to hit a couple of quick points that I'd like to point out specifically to you, and then leave you with the encouragement to review the report in more detail when you have an opportunity. Riveting is probably a strong word to use for an audit report, unless you're an auditor like myself. Most people would find it to help you sleep maybe more than riveting, but at least I was nice to hear that, because I at least think about that way myself sometimes. But let's start off here, and I just want to go over a couple quick things on page 1 of the audit report. I just want to take you to a couple quick pages and point a few things out. As Paul mentioned, I'm proud and happy to report that the fact that the city did receive what we call an unqualified opinion. As Paul said, that is kind of a weird way of saying a clean opinion, but in our words, that means that we are not qualifying it. We're not saying with any exceptions, if, ands, or buts, or except for this, or except for that, that we feel the whole financial statements without any qualification or unqualified or fairly present the financial position of the city. And that again is the gold standard, is the expectation, whether you are a Fortune 500 company, whether you're a nonprofit or a local government, you wish to receive an unqualified opinion. So again, I congratulate the city on getting that. Again, that is, as a board, that's something that's the expectation you should have of management, that it should be that way. But I encourage you never to assume that it's going to be that way. That is a result of the hard work of the management, the finance staff, all the way down to the administrative, clerical staff, doing the day-to-day mundane tasks appropriately, correctly, from just paying the electric bill, that it was properly approved, the proper funds were used, the proper documentation was with it, that it was kept and filed correctly, so that when I show up and ask to see that information, and I do ask for a ton of information, as Cindy can attest to, so we're required to see that. That is our audit evidence that we need to see in order to make that opinion and issue that opinion. So again, that goes back to the fine work of everybody here, from management all the way down to the clerical staff, especially it falls largely on Cindy and Paul to make sure that those things are done correctly and are there. So we appreciate that. It does make our job go a whole lot easier and a lot better, and I appreciate that. The second thing, as Paul mentioned, there's 2 reports in here, and then on page 41 you'll see when you discuss the single audit. A single audit is a requirement when an organization, whether a local government or even a nonprofit organization, receives and expends more than $750,000 in federal funding during 1 year, they're required to have what we call an additional single audit. What that is a compliance audit. As you might imagine, all funding comes with a list of rules, and we make sure that the city then complied with all the thou must do's and thou must not do's with those federal funds. And as you'll see in this letter right here, the city, we had no issues, no findings, no concerns, that everything was handled correctly. That is very important that we were able to make that statement, because this is something that is reviewed. We upload this to a federal website, and for future grant requests, if the city's applying for something that may come up down the road, you never know when these things come available. One of the first things one of those organizations is going to do is look and see how the city has handled prior funds. whether there was issues or whether they handled them appropriately. And obviously, having handled it appropriately will help in hopefully the city being able to acquire any type of competitive grants or different situations like that when we move the city up the line and receiving those. So that's, again, a great thing on that. So I wanted to point that out to you. Again, I encourage y'all to read over the financials and the notes to the financials. I think you'll see the city is in a strong financial position. One of the nice things I noticed was the growth in the fund balance for the general fund, up almost $8 million over the prior year. So again, they have a strong financial position. I encourage you also to read the notes to the financials. I don't know if they're riveting or not again, but they do provide a lot of what I call meat on the bone. They explain the numbers themselves, and I think you would find the information helpful when you're asked to vote on how to expend the limited funds of the city, and knowing what's coming down the road, where the city is, trends, that type of thing, or already commitments of the city to help you feel more confident in making that decision on how to vote on things. But again, I appreciate the opportunity to serve the city again this year. I consider it an honor and a privilege to work with the city. And thank, again, Cindy, Paul, the entire staff, all the department heads. Everybody was very gracious and helpful this year with the audit, and I appreciate that. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer those. But again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Toth. Appreciate the presentation. And is at the end of the presentation, is it okay to open it up for questions from city council members? Great. I know that, I think this is the 9th audit that I've been involved with for the city, and this is the 9th consecutive unqualified. So that's a pretty good run. Anybody have any questions or comments about the audit report? Yes, Mr. Anderson.
Wayne, in your experience, what percentage of local governments receive an unqualified audit? If you had just to guess.
That's a toughie there. I would say it would be in the high 90s.
Okay.
I would
So
say it's pretty common, yes.
You would want it to be.
You would hope it would be, yes. But I have seen some incidents, and I've been in a couple myself, where it was very questionable whether it was going to happen. I have seen firms just decide to withdraw from being engaged in certain circumstances. But there's definitely, I know of a few governments that are struggling out there with the ability, or auditors that have to walk away and say, you need to get your financial records in order. We can't, you're not going to want us auditing this. And I've seen that happen. Fortunately, not with my clients, but I have seen it happen.
Thank you. And I can see the comments, but if anybody's got questions for Wayne.
Is there anybody else? All right, Mr. Anderson, you're welcome to. Thank you, Mr. Toth.
I guess, honestly, I make a big deal out of the audit every year. I think it's the most important document that the city produces. So I want to thank Cindy and her team. As Wayne pointed out, it's a lot of work. It falls a lot on Cindy and her staff to get that to a point where we can get an unqualified audit. And I want to thank Wayne. I appreciate the work they've done. Their firm has audited our financials for many years. And it's great that we got the 9th consecutive unqualified audit in a row. Every year that Paul and Cindy have been at the city, our audit has been unqualified. And as we heard, this is the gold standard, meaning that there are no issues and we're in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles. And third, I want to thank, of course, our city manager and the management team for that unqualified audit. It's a great thing for our city. And as Wayne said, quite frankly, an unqualified audit is my and our council and our mayor's expectation. That is absolutely our expectation. Every year, I mention the audit is the most important document that the city produces. And an unqualified audit is financial transparency that assures our citizens that their taxes and other fees are paid, are accounted for, every dollar. That's of critical importance to both the trust instilled in us as mayor and council and as a government. Now, neither the state law nor our charter require mayor and council to accept the audit through a public vote. It could have been simply transmitted to the state once complete, and a copy Wayne would send to us, to mayor and council. However, our policy for the last 9 years has been for mayor and council to have a public presentation on the audit and vote on its acceptance That's a level of financial transparency that I'm proud of, and absolutely the right thing to do. I'm proud of the 9 straight unqualified audits. I'm also embarrassed that it's only 9 straight. There was a period of time in the not so recent past in which this was not the case. For whatever reason, prior to Mayor Edwards and our current city manager, there was a period of time in which the city not only didn't have unqualified audits, it went for a period of years without an audit. I can't fathom why or how that happened, and it's totally unacceptable. It resulted in the city's loss of state grants, including the ability to receive state funds for repaving of roads. And while that's incredibly unfortunate, given that it's the loss of tax money paid by our citizens, even more ridiculous is the lack of transparency in accounting for our citizens' tax dollars, to the point that an IRS agent visited the city due to lack of reporting of withholding taxes. I can't imagine that level of incompetence. But there was a period of time not long ago when that happened. I also want to make a comment about the timing of this meeting. As I mentioned previously, there were extenuating circumstances that resulted in a later adoption of the audit, but today's meeting is simply procedural. Not only was it not required by state law or charter, but the audit itself is unqualified. We like to joke that the audit is something that you read if you're having trouble sleeping. And that's exactly what an audit should be: boring and unqualified. But I do want to talk about a period of time in the city's past between the years 1998 and 2006 when the city had special called meetings in late December half of the time. I bring these up because there are incoming city council members who were part of mayor and council during that period and who, for whatever reason, felt it necessary to insinuate on social media that something was going on other than what we're doing today. A non-charter, non-state law required procedural vote on an unqualified audit. Which is ironic as I go through 4 special called meetings in late December during that period, given the subject matter of those meetings. In 1998, the city had a special called meeting on December 29th, in which it considered 5 pieces of old business that included a rate increase in sanitation services, 2 resolutions on legislative annexation of property, a sale of city property, and a raising of permit fees. Further, it had 4 pieces of new business, including a public hearing, an adoption of the city's budget, an occupation tax ordinance amendment, a resolution on Freeport exemptions, and an issuance of gas system revenue refund bonds. They also had a 2-hour executive session, which resulted in the nomination of a new acting city manager. In 2000, the city had a special called meeting on December 19th at 8 a.m. with a final public hearing for the city's budget, in which the city adopted the budget. In 2001, the city had a special called meeting on December 18th, again for a public hearing and adoption of the budget. And finally, in 2006, the city had a special called meeting on December 20th at 11:30 a.m. with another public hearing and adoption of the city's budget, along with the approval of the West Broad Street design changes. These meetings were much more than procedural. Public hearings, budget adoptions, annexations, and they were a common occurrence. So, with that, Mayor, I make a motion to accept and adopt the 2022 audit as presented and to direct the city manager to transmit it to the state.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I have a motion to adopt. Is there a second? Second from Ms. Thatcher. Any further conversation before I call the vote? All right, all those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. All right. All right, we have no need for executive session. Let's adjourn this meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn? I have a motion to adjourn from Mr. Anderson and a second from Mr. Cullen. That is undebatable. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Good. We are adjourned.